welcome to a new episode of CTRM Radio. Now, geopolitics has become a major factor in energy and commodity markets, driving volatility and uncertainty. Wars, sanctions, regulations, political initiatives, and much more cause unanticipated disruptions, increasing operational risk and even potentially posing an existential threat to businesses. Now, all of this is also having a significant impact on the need for new and improved technologies and new functionalities in CTRM and related software. To find out what those impacts might be, I turned to three industry leaders, and I can tell you, this is quite some conversation, and it will captivate and inform you as it did me. Well, my guest today is Sunil Biswas, CEO at Ion Corporates, Andrea Stone, CEO of Zema Global, and Lee Campbell, CEO of CubeLogic. I thank them both for their time and for their insights. Let's get started. So perhaps we can get started by introductions, and let's start with ladies first. Andrea, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. I knew you were going to do that. So I'm Andrea Stone. I'm the CEO of Zema Global. And we are what we like to call a decision engineering platform for the commodity and energy related companies. We provide a suite of services that help our customers get decision ready data and then perform high value analytics in enterprise software.
Thank you very much. Lee Campbell.
Yeah, hi, Lee Campbell. I'm founder and CEO of CubeLogic. We're a risk management platform, been around for 15 years. We sort of focus on enterprise credit risk, market risk, and compliance for primarily energy and commodities companies globally.
Thank you very much. Sunil Biswas.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sunil Biswas. I'm the CEO of Ion Corporates, which is one of 6 divisions at Ion, a major provider of fintech technology to corporations, banks, and financial institutions. And we provide ETRM and CTRM solutions to the commodities industry.
So let's go right back to you, Sunil. Plainly, there's a lot going on geopolitically, and it seems to me that some of this must be having a substantial impact on buyer requirements for things like CTRM software. What are you seeing there, and how do you think this translates into emerging requirements for an Ion, for example?
Great question to kick off with, Gary. So let me divide this into sort of like 2, right? So first, long-term trends, energy transition, we see that playing out in Europe, and there's this constant underlying theme towards renewable energy sources. That's causing a massive pivot away from hydrocarbons, or at least it was until we had a change of administration here in the United States. We're sort of like seeing a hold on to hydrocarbons, but that long-term trend is certainly there, and that's certainly changing the landscape. Coupled with that, we have unfortunate events like the war in Ukraine. We have meltdown in the Middle East, and we have supply chain disruptions, anything from Nord Stream to Suez Canal getting clogged up, right? All of these require us to work with our customer base to figure out how we provide decision support in these times of disruption. And in today's fast-moving geopolitical news world, real-time access to information so that you can react straight away as markets move is certainly front and center. And these are just some of the dynamics that play out in the ETRM, CTRM market.
Andrea, you're on the data side and the analytics side. What do you see happening there in terms of emerging challenges because of geopolitics for your users?
Sure. So the first thing we see a much broader demand for more diversity of data. So a great example would be, if you're running a utility in Switzerland, your interest in data isn't going to be just local hydro and your local municipalities. You're going to be interested in what's going on with nuclear. You're going to be interested in LNG. You're going to be interested in a much broader span of market pricing and weather data that can impact, the day-to-day lives of your retail consumers. The second thing, in terms of more diverse data, we're seeing more dynamic data. meaning we want our customers to really understand all of the inputs that are going to be impacting factors, for example, like resiliency, right? Because resiliency is becoming a key focus area to really understand the interplay between the intermittency of resiliency with, your more hydrocarbons and traditional fossil fuel-based power sources. So this multi-asset class dynamic to the data didn't really exist 4 or 5 years ago. Not only do people have to look at that now, we also have multiple markets that are moving to trading in faster increments. So, with over I think nine different countries in Europe that are going to sub 15-minute or 5-minute trading intervals, you're coupling that with emergence of algorithmic trading. So from an analytics perspective, you have to have much better agility with your data. You have to understand where you might have predictive AI and how that can impact markets at a much greater speed and flexibility than you've ever had before. So when you couple, the data diversity, dynamic data sources, fast-paced, real-time analytics, all impacting the market, really understanding your risks and being able to flexibly adapt to them is one of the biggest challenges that I see in the new reality of a regionalized view as opposed to globalism as your major policy driver.
Right, right. And that takes us neatly to Lee, because CubeLogic obviously cover many aspects of risk, including regulatory risk, which is another area of, I guess, geopolitics as well. So what are you seeing happening in your sphere, Lee?
I think there's more focus. Yeah, there's a huge focus on the sort of compliance, which is, as you say, very regional. We're seeing, in the last few years, a lot more volume of data because of just, we've gone away from long-term contracts to a lot more spot trading. So the volume of data adds to the complexity of data, which then means there's a lot more. You need to have all that data in one place to be able to manage the risk or the compliance monitoring, which might have been possible to do manually with much lower volumes. So there's more of a demand for systematic compliance. And on the credit side, I think there's a lot more a need to understand who your counterparties are. Where's the ultimate parent? Is it a sanctioned entity where maybe it wasn't before? So there's a lot more need for data and insight into who you're actually trading before you actually do the trade, so that you can actually make the right kind of credit decisions or buyer or seller decisions from a kind of geopolitical standpoint. So I think, again, it's all about getting more data and more insight into who you're doing business with. And then, of course, from a location perspective, is it, it's coming from a ship? Is it going through a particular region that's going to cause you a problem? So there's that kind of operational risk as well that I think is coming into it in a much more relevant way, with the underlying need for things like, insurance and, and cover for those kinds of things like shipping risk.
Yeah, when I first broached this idea of doing something around geopolitics and the impact on all these CTRM and related software, somebody said to me, well, surely, Gary, it's just about more volatility, isn't it? But, as I look at it, volatility is certainly a major and important aspect of all the change, but it's much more than that. So again, if we can come to Sunil, I mean, what are the areas in the CTRM world where you're seeing people really wanting to focus to increase agility so that they can respond to change faster? Perhaps it's areas like logistics, for example.
Yeah.
I'd be looking at transportation disruption, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so it's a great point. So it's not volatility, it's supply chain disruption. And when we talk about supply chain, we would tie it, Ukraine was a breadbasket. Grain doesn't flow to the Middle East the way it used to. If you think of Nord Stream 2, which was gas being piped into Europe, now we have a pipeline going from Siberia to China, right? LNG used to flow from, Middle East and from the United States into Japan, China. Now that's redirected into Europe, right? So it's these supply chain disruptions and dislocations that have broken, the flow of commodities and energy from, let's say, 3-4 years ago, and new supply chains have been created. we've actually seen a movement of workforce, right? Dubai has grown as the center. So, to come back to your original question, what's changed? We have a lot of new startup, new entrants, trading companies emerging in the Middle East, that are key players who are acting in a marketing capability, both on commodity procurement and then selling on of refined products. On the shipping and logistics and transportation costs, that doesn't become an afterthought and just baked into the cost of the transaction. That all needs to be planned upfront. Going back to what I was saying about businesses becoming much more real-time and data sensitive. Again, the focus of having access to information in real time or near real time so you can trade as markets move. Again, more and more critical and important to the commodities and energy market.
Yeah. Lee, what are you seeing in terms of this real-time need? Are you seeing people wanting more event-driven risk management, for example? Are you seeing, and I guess this goes for Andrea as well when we get to you in a minute, are you seeing breakdowns in historical price of data, sort of dislocations in terms of how historical price data now matches pricing data today having an impact, for example?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a need for more real-time information, more data at the point of trade, so that you can make the right kind of decision about what you want to do from a trading strategy. You need all that data quickly. I think the other element around the kind of how you kind of procure, how you kind of measure the underlying risk of the kind of who you're trading is obviously a fundamental thing that has completely changed in terms of who you're working with, where they're located. And I think there's a geopolitical element to that, but also, as you pointed out, a kind of carbon transition and a kind of climate change element. I think, are you doing business in areas where there's instability, flooding, all those kinds of things? They add certain risks to who you're trading with, I think, that perhaps weren't there, years ago. And as I mentioned, so the sanctions, are you dealing with a country that's a bad actor? I think there's also kind of increased cyber threats as well. There's infrastructure. Where do you actually put the servers? What data centers are you using? Is that open to threats? I mean, that's a huge thing now. Where's the data located? There was a cleared a move to the cloud, and a more of an openness to kind of go in that direction. The scalability, all the reasons why you would do it, but suddenly people are now worried about that data getting to someone that's not friendly. There's a lot more bad actors and unfriendliness around at the moment, which is a key point that people consider.
Right. So Andrea, same sort of question. One of the things that I see is, when German nukes were taken out of the equation, then suddenly price there was a shift in pricing, for example, and historical trends broke down. Are you seeing data being sort of trends in data being disrupted by geopolitical change and that having an impact on what people are wanting to consume and how they want to use it?
Absolutely. We're not just seeing a demand for more real-time data. We're also seeing a demand for more real-world data, right? So what we see with real-time is obviously we have major price swings, and a lot of people's risk models or even data models are tuned to have much narrower bands in terms of what an acceptable price swing would be. That then drives the need for more real-time trading, more real-time hedging, more scenario planning. And people are, again, as I mentioned before, looking for more breadth in data to evaluate scenarios. One of the things that we see historically in this market is that scenario planning has historically been very deterministically driven, where you can really only change a handful of patterns. What we're seeing is a drive for more stochastic analysis, where I can look at a variety of different scenarios and come up with a lot of different potential outcomes and really have more input into the variables that I'm seeking. This is particularly true when I turn to look at real world data. So what we're seeing is people are looking at the actual performance, in particular in renewables, of real assets and seeing that they can't do proper scenario planning because some of the scenarios don't factor in real world situations like negative pricing, like renewable curtailment. These haven't been factored into the cash flow and the asset valuation models that sit underneath many of these assets. So the productivity of assets are very hard to model when they don't have real world pricing data sitting underneath them. Historical data, we have 25 years of it, but the reality is we haven't seen a period of volatility over the last 25 years, such like that we've seen in the last 3 years in particular. So there's not a lot of good models that you can train your AI or train your predictive analytics against. So you really almost have to have the ability to model out a variety of scenarios and then work backwards. And the last thing that I would say is there's regulatory changes that also need to be factored into pricing. It is very difficult to price a guarantee of origin or renewable energy credit. And as we apply tariffs and as we look at changes in regulation, there's a lot of opacity in how these are traded or brokered. So it is difficult to really get at the types of data that you need to evaluate how assets are performing in the real world and then look at them from a total portfolio perspective. You want to be looking at both the liquid securities that you're using to hedge your positions and the values of those assets and how they're actually performing in markets that have real big price volatility swings that we really haven't seen in at least 15 years. So it's just putting a lot of stress on the system. And we're finding that a lot of our customers are looking for more dynamic tools that they can use throughout the day because when these shocks happen, we really need to shorten that time from a question to insight or a question to decision so that we can take action much more quickly in more flexible environments.
I'm glad you mentioned AI, and we'll stay with you because the other part of this is what kind of impact is all this having on your technology adoption and deployment? Things like artificial intelligence, for example, but what about other types of architecture, data storage, data in the cloud, all this kind of thing? What are you seeing there as impacts of geopolitical change?
So I believe that the price of data will become synonymous with the price of energy. I think, what we're seeing is technological innovation is happening at such a fast pace. The cost of buying new technology architectures is dropping. So all of our customers are out there buying data lakes, dumping data into data lakes, and it's a successful strategy. It makes a lot of sense, but what it lacks is governance.
Yeah.
And when you don't have good data governance or good data lineage, you don't have decision-ready data to train your AI models. Right. So that's point number one, which is the infrastructure to come up with the technology to exploit AI is getting cheaper and cheaper. The governance around it is really hasn't been addressed. And the governance around it is also very specific to the assets that any oil and gas company or even renewable company, what they actually own. So you have to intersperse your assets and your view of data on top of data governance concerns to get a good set of decision-ready data to drive your AI. The second thing that I think everyone is looking at when it comes to AI, historical data needs to have that same level of integrity, and it doesn't really exist in any one spot that you can do that. Many of our customers are recreating their own historical data sets to, again, have the ability to run more AI and algorithmic and predictive analytics. And the third thing that I would leave about AI is that AI is effectively ungoverned by regulators. When you look at how much AI pulls down from the grid, it is quite shocking that the technology industry that is developing these AI models is not being regulated. It's really surprising.
Yeah.
We are seeing potential brownout scenarios in places that no one wants to talk about because we're having certain data centers in certain parts of the world where AI is being trained are being extremely energy intensive. And it's something that no one is really talking about. So to Lee's point, understanding where the data actually resides and data residency and data controls is something that we're also seeing a lot of customers paying attention to. They need to make sure that they've got resiliency in their data residency so that their AI strategies aren't going to be too taxing on the actual energy infrastructure we're trying to transform and modernize. It's frightening.
Yeah. Actually, we just did a report on AI, and one of the aspects of that was just governance of AI internally in general, in that This is a huge, I think the governance side of AI is something that's not gotten as much consideration as it really needs. Now,
Gary, let me just add one thing,
yeah,
which
go
I
ahead.
think is a great term. What we have seen from a lot of our customers that have gone through all of the work to, modernize their cloud infrastructures and put data into data lakes, they describe what happens inside their organization as a mushrooming effect. Because there is no data governance, finding the right data at the right time to make a real-time dynamic decision is actually harder than ever. So, to your point, technology, while it's an empowering capability, is also creating such flexibility without the right governance models that we have to be really careful how we apply AI. Tons of potential, and it's great what we can achieve, but it is a bit. It's one of the things that our industry is going to have to overcome.
Yeah, totally.
I also think it's how, is your own data safe? Can it suddenly be then popping up in someone else's LLM? So it's how do you protect your own data and still, gain the insight of the AI from, public data?
Right.
You're going to see kind of AI firewalls, those kinds of things emerging, I think, because you've got a huge amount of data that's in your own organization, in your own cloud, in your own kind of within your own firewall you want to protect, because that's potentially, very sensitive, as business critical. And it, if it gets into the wrong hands or it gets suddenly used by competitors, then that's not great.
Lee, I just have to add one thing. One thing I have noticed as a relative, somewhat newcomer to the energy industry is that a lot of our analytics are based on data that is easily accessible,
Exactly.
not necessarily data that's particularly insightful. And part of the reason why that is the case is that a lot of the data is extremely proprietary. And that goes down to the nature of the physical assets and where they are in the world. That is what drives a high degree of data privacy inside this industry. And without good governance, we're going to potentially we're going to see people analyzing data that may provide good insight, but it also could provide some truths that may make some of our major providers uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I think it also, given that and the changing geopolitics where people aren't quite as friendly anymore,
That's
these
right.
things, you've got assets, you don't want people to know about that. They can be used against you.
Yeah, but we see this very, very directly. We have a very broad customer base, and the proprietary data that we were just talking about tends to sit in the primary transaction record system, which is the ETRM, CTRM solutions that we here at IAM provide. We've seen challenges in AI as AI has evolved, right? So there was the predictive set of models of what to do next in a particular workflow and sort of like decision support, and that data really is an intersection of what's publicly available information correlated with what you know and your positions and holdings internally to help you make the best decision. Then we jumped up into generative AI that allowed people that weren't necessarily the experts sitting on the trading floors to start to get access to information to help drive and innovate within businesses. What we see today, actually, though, is something quite different, which is the introduction of agentic AI, which further automates business processes, right? And this is really taking us to the next level and probably the most interesting. So if you look at, some of the key focus areas that have exploded because of geopolitics and market disruptions, of like scenario analysis, forecasting for power purchase agreements, how to make more money by doing asset-backed trading, as a complement to normal business operations. I mean, all of these workflows and underlying data sets that would have historically required an army of people to process now all have AI-enabled agents to sit alongside, and that really gives power and transformation to what happens, in the workplace for our customers. And it's a combination of both public domain data, internal data sets, and what we as vendor solution companies can provide in the terms of software solutions to further automate processes.
Sunil, in terms of processes and supply chains, what are you seeing in terms of demand for what I would call exception management, i.e., having the machine process 95, 99% of the transactions that logically seem to be correct and isolating just the few that need sort of human intervention?
No, I mean, it's we see it all the time. I mean, just to not give too much away here, but you know, when we are introducing CTRM, ETRM, or some of our other mission critical systems across our portfolio of solutions to new entrants into the marketplace, the sale is not, here's what we can do for you. It's how do you manage your business? Do you manage your business by exception? Right? Headcount is a premium for all organizations, and we're at a stage now that as long as you can put in place the security, you have the resiliency, you have your data sets clean, then management by exception very much comes to the forefront as the way to run your business out of the door. Yeah. Right? And I would say that the firms that struggle the most with this are those that set up their systems, their operating models, you know, 15, 20 years ago, right? Because they've got processes in place that were, you know, almost pre-cloud in some ways. Whereas those that are coming to market now, just coming off of spreadsheets, looking for their first solution, can immediately jump to exception-based management.
Indeed. Lee, I've talked to a few people in your organization recently, so I know you've got some initiatives going on around AI and you know, technology. Tell us a little bit about what you're up to in terms of responding to this initiative.
Yeah, so obviously, you know, we are transitioning. I mean, we started off 15 years ago with quite a sort of monolithic sort of, you know, kind of on-premise type of product, you know, data gathering and then, you know, processing and then analysis. So we've transitioned to a cloud. We're now going pure cloud native. The data lake is obviously a key piece of that. And then how the AI can kind of automate and, as you know, as Sunil mentioned, drive by exception. So we do a lot of things around onboarding of companies, you know, credit analysis, you know, scoring those companies, integrating data from third parties to give you that overall kind of profile, and gathering data around things like KYC, all the things that are really important. But given the complexity of the trading portfolio now, you're seeing a lot more counterparties, a lot more complexity in who you're dealing with. So you have to have that automation, and that's where the technologies can really drive this and make it much more efficient, because they're going to kind of handle all the sort of, you know, the 90% of the portfolio more simply, whereas, you know, that 90% is a big number now, a much bigger number than it perhaps was, you know, 3 or 4 years ago. So the manpower to deal with, you know, with the remainder of the portfolio kind of stays the same. And obviously, you know, there's an energy squeeze, there's, you know, it's cost implications. So you know, one of the drivers is the increased volumes, but also the cost of actually managing these larger portfolios with the number of people they have. So it can actually really help companies and just deal with all the kind of manual stuff, so that you get more insight into the exceptions and the things that you really need to look into. You know, who is this company that, you know, has popped up on my exception queue? You know, that's where you kind of combine automated AI with, you know, quality individuals that can look at the exceptions.
Yeah.
What we're trying to kind of drive through with our kind of risk management platform.
Well, I've got to say, listening to the three of you and sort of looking at my own experience, I've been involved in this industry, as many of you know, since the 90s. And I don't think I've ever experienced a time when there was more change and more, you know, it's just like, how do you guys cope with all of this? How do you sleep at night, and how do you prioritize what you need to do as an organization? Sunil, let's start with you.
Well, our first thing is we engage our customers, right? So we, as you know, Gary, we meet our customers yearly at user events. We seek feedback. We're increasingly talking to those that regulate or set standards within industries. It is a community, right? We're here to serve a community. AI is, as we've said, is, there's a total lack of governance, but it is in many ways the responsibility of the leaders of the community to set those standards, put the guardrails in place, for the community. And one of the things that we're doing, and Andrea is certainly well aware of this, here at Iron, we look at a broader ecosystem of how we connect and integrate in with other providers of solutions in the commodities and energy space. And, our goal is to make the life of the mutual customer better, by improving the end user experience, right? So it's a collection of what we here at Iron can bring, what peer firms on the street can bring, and obviously serving our customers in this ever-changing world. And we do so in a way that is controlled, and we do so in a way of high quality. So that's really our ethos and how we operate.
Lee, what about you?
Yeah, I think for us, it's we do kind of have a continued sort of engagement with our clients in these kind of tech working groups and kind of functional working groups, because there's a parallel stream of how do we make the products better? What do customers need to kind of make their lives easier from a kind of usability and a functional perspective? And how are the regulations changes? How do we keep up with that? And then how can the underlying tech stack move forward? And I think at Cube, it is really it's a continued investment in the platform, because you can never you can never stand still. And as you pointed out, this is the most dramatic period of change that we've seen. And I think what our software did and looked like 15 years ago is just completely nothing like what it looks like today. It's completely changed.
Yeah.
Luckily, all the kind of code that I originally put in is now gone. And quite rightly so.
And Andrea, what about you? Because you've basically somewhat new to this space, and you've got 2 or 3 parts to the organization that you're trying to bring together and point in the right general direction. So that makes it even tougher, doesn't it?
Well, it definitely has been an interesting year and a half, putting 3 different businesses together. Thankfully, we are all now cloud native across all 3. The ZE Power was really the first to help move the energy industry to the private cloud. And we're really pleased to be bringing them to, a multi-cloud strategy, and also making sure that we can help get their decision-ready data into a format which really empowers our customers to use the data to help drive decisions and help drive those decisions to insight faster. Velocity is very important. So, one of the things that we've been focused on is moving at the speed of business, moving at the speed of our customers' business. So one of the things that, bringing these 3 companies together, we created a 24/7 global support model, because we recognize that's how our customers work, right? They follow the markets, and we have to be there to support them. So that's been a key area of focus for us. In addition, we've been focusing on being flexible and dynamic. So it's our job when our customers come to us and say, hey, I need to be active in this market quickly. We have to give them that starter kit, right? The starter kit of here's the breadth of data that's available in this market. Here's a starter perspective on curves. We really need to make sure that they can get up and running quickly so that they can be dynamic as the market is moving around them. And then I would say the next thing that we really focus on with our customers is listening and helping them embed their know-how in systematic processes and workflows. This is something that we've been doing for 25 years. We need to do it in a much more digitally native way, but you'd be surprised how many of our customers are frustrated with the continued reliance on Excel and to some extent Python in highly ungoverned ways. So a big focus that we have is how do we help our customers get the benefit of something I like to call the consistency premium, where they know that consistent data that has their house view is embedded into workflows that run systematically in an automated fashion, and that ultimately, to the point Sunil was alluding to, drive better interoperability for this industry. We have hundreds of downstream integration partners, and really, to move quickly in this space, you want to work with fewer, larger partners that can help you on a digital transformation agenda where you can align with your customers and with each other and work cohesively. So that's another thing that we've been trying to do is work with, really important partners to make sure that we're giving customers that interoperability that they're looking for so that they can drive a consistent view of data they believe in, data that they have confidence in. How do we connect the various pieces so that they aren't focused on making the technology work and they are focused on making a smart decision for their business?
Brilliant. I'd like to thank the three of you for taking the time out. It's been absolutely fascinating and very much appreciated. Thank you.